Tech Talk Tuesday, test. Garen, how's it going, man? Let me give you a little test, everybody. Vacuum, volume, viewing, vacation, Jerry, Jim, JJ, wow. Hey, Jim, John. Hey, Jim, John, Michael. How y'all guys? 25 of you coming in fast. Michael, Ed, Billy Cullum. Hey, Billy. Charlie. Oh, my gosh, Charlie, you are so faithful. Thank you, man. I probably got to buy you a Diet Coke next time I see you, man. I see you on here just about every week. Thank you, Jerry, Scott, Garen, yep, Jim. Hey, test. Daryl, we got some cool stuff, man. I am so thankful that we've had, this is our 90th show. 90 weeks in a row, y'all. Good grief. If I would have lost a bet if you'd have told me I could do something for 30 minutes every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock Eastern, 90 weeks in a row. That is amazing. I saw a quote last night that said, consistency breeds consistency. So we need to remember that, y'all. Hey, John, I hope you're doing well, man. Praying for you. John, also praying for you too. My two Johns, Matt. Hey, there's a Hemi Hensley. What a great handle, man. Steve and Matt, Lindsay, Kevin. Man, that guy right there gives a whole new meaning to the word single cylinder. Chuck, David, thank y'all for tuning in. I got some cool stuff to share. I know I've said that like 6 times already. Charlie, Ricky, Nikki, Gene, Luck. I don't even know how you say it. Jan, Luck, Gilbert. That's probably a different language, but he spelled my name right. Hey, Scott. Vincent, man, that's my man right there. That is Pro Street a long time ago. Turned into Pro Mod. Michael, Josh. So, practice makes permanent. I love that. That is so true, man. I was just talking to a friend of mine in Vegas this weekend about him practicing, and you get what you practice, and if you practice it wrong, you get it. If you practice right, that's what you get. So it's programming. Hey, John, any of you guys that run a CNC machine, or you know what one is, where you write a program on a computer or a laptop or something, and then you load it into the machine, and the machine does what you tell it to. You tell the machine. So if the machine makes a mistake, 99.9% of the times it was the programming that was the fault, or the one that made the mistake. So it usually goes back to a human. And if it was the software or the program that made the mistake, that's still programmed by a human. So the human element to all this is substantial and often forgotten. You can have the fastest race car at the track. You can have the most powerful engine. Thank you, Vincent. That's a really nice, man. Pat, if you can have the most powerful engine at the racetrack, and if the humans involved hook everything up backwards, or don't charge the battery, or they don't put fuel in it, or let one tire down on the air, because on one tire let air out because they're talking on the phone or watching Facebook or trying to do some TikTok or some FaceTime, usually something goes wrong. And I hate to blame the phone, but I noticed that over 66 years watching humans, I see that we're looking down. We're looking down towards the ground. And if you put a cell phone between our head and the ground, it's usually what we're looking at. So we need to start looking up, y'all. As a society, as a bunch of people, let's look up. There's more to world and life and the earth than what's below our head. Most of it's up here. So I got a lot of cool ideas that I want to share with you about going up. And we're going to go up in vacuum. We're going to go up in crankcase ring seal. We're going to go up in altitude and barometer. We're going to go up in performance. And there's a lot of cool stuff here. Ron, Jimbo. I'm sorry, I can't really name all these cool. Yeah, you guys are cool. Thank you, Ron, PJ. If I read your names out and spoke to each and every one of you, I would say, okay, time's up. Let's go. That was Tech Talk. Say hi to everybody Tuesday. So I'm going to skip over some of these names. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Hey, Greg. And I want to talk for a minute about some things that really I learned the hard way, and I want to share with you because I'm not in that venue or that field anymore, so I don't mind if you guys learn from that, because I don't really have I mean, I don't have like the next little GB3 following along behind me wants to take off where I left off, so I'm handing off. Take off where I left off, so I'm handing off. Wow, that's cool sounding by accident. So, back in 1993, that wasn't that long ago to some of us, but some of us, that was before we were born. But listen to me for a minute. I was blessed and asked by a very smart, really, really good guy who was running a pro stock car back in 1993, and he was sponsored by Texaco Systems 3 gasoline. He had a beautiful show quality black and white and red Oldsmobile Cutlass. It was built by Don Ness in Minnesota, and it was literally a show car. And he was getting engines from different shops, and he was running around near the qualifying spot. But he was spending good money and doing good work, and he had his own shop, his own 18-wheeler. He had his own dyno, and he had a really one of the best guys I ever met, Bill Smith. He's long gone now, but he was the crew chief. And he asked me to go along with him to the race because he went and we were from Georgia. We tested at Commerce, and we tested with the late, great John Myers, and he would go and test with us. And Warren Johnson was there testing, and we got to be friends and learned a lot along the way. So he said, hey, Gino, he said, come go with me to Denver. He said, man, we struggle at Denver. I said, Denver? Why do we want to go there? And he said, well, we're having a race, and if we do a good job with tuning, I believe we can do good at Denver. And I said, all right, I'll go with you. So he bought me a motel room, an airplane ticket, and got me some food, and dressed me out in the Texaco Systems 3 gasoline uniform. Man, I felt official, and I had been going with John Myers. I'd been going to the NHRA races in 1989, 90, 91, 92, and we were winning races, winning championships, but we didn't race at Denver. We were running 10 races a year, maybe 12, and history shows us that back in the day when John Myers was racing, God bless his soul, man, what a great man. I learned a lot from John. What a great learning experience to run with him over the years. But we ran 9 to 12 races a year, and he won, in his 8 years as a pro, he won 33 national events on our team. And we had a great time learning. So we made a blip on the radar in the professional categories as pro stock motorcycle just became a pro category during that time. And when we would go to the starting line, John Force and Warren Johnson and Bob Glidden and those hero guys were all out there at the same time. So we all got to watching each other race with Kenny Bernstein and them, and it was a cool time to learn. But people noticed how good John Myers and I were doing with our race team. We were winning and qualifying on the pole, and in 1990 through 91, we got traveling all over, going to IDBA, let's see what else we did. We did NHRA, AMRA, some other AMDRA, whatever. I can't remember all the acronyms, but we qualified number one at 13 races in a row. In any category where you qualify on the pole 13 times in a row over a period of a year, people will notice. So we got the opportunity, to make a long story short, to go to Denver and help Gary Brown with his pro stock car. So we went up for first round, and I said, there's no air here. I mean, literally, the barometer's low. We couldn't get a correction factor because the barometer had gone around a couple of times. We had a barometer that was at 30.1 when we left home, and it went all the way around. The barometer did a full 360 and back somewhere else, and we could not call the number out. So the weather stations back then weren't great, so we were guessing. I said, we're down on power. We're going to have to turn the RPM up. So we turned the two-step up, and back then we didn't know that everybody back then used to put the car off the lifts, pro stock car, and they'd back it out a little bit from in the pits, in their tent, and they would roll forward with the engine running, and they'd set the line lock, put it at, say, 900 pounds, and pump up the brake, hold the line lock, put it in low gear, and put the clutch all the way down and floor it and see if the car would move. And what they were testing was air gap on the clutch, and we didn't know. We didn't do it, so Gary goes up there first round of qualifying. He rolls in the stage, puts both lights on against Bob Glidden, and the 4 lights are on, so Gary floors it, and the car lurches forward. And I'm like, wow, what happened? And he said, I couldn't hold it back. So we started studying and learning and realizing that we were going to have to put a bunch of air gap in the starting line because those guys were launching at 7,000 and 7,400 and 7,600. And so we we kept moving the air gap on the clutch, and I learned a lot about clutches back then, and we were launching high enough where the car wouldn't bog. Well, we finally got in, and we ran really good, and I learned so much, and I heard a rumor Pro Stock bikes were going to Denver that year or the next year. So John and we decided to leave early and go to Denver and rent a chassis dyno downtown in Denver. I forgot the name of the bike shop, which I'm very disappointed that I don't remember that, because it changed a lot of things for us, because I'd never been on a chassis dyno back then. And we put the bike on the dyno. No. We had a chassis dyno at home, and it made, I don't know, 200 horse. And back then, and at the tire, and we went to Denver, and it made like 160. So we said for sure something's wrong with the bike, but we learned that there was not enough power there. So we didn't know why at the time. So I started studying the weather, started studying about the barometer and corrected altitude and things like that. But when you go to Denver, way back then, they had the index classes, like the 990 class, the 1090 class, and the 890 class. They had modified those indexes, because an 890 car at Gainesville wouldn't go but like a 960 at Denver, doing nothing. So anyway, our Pro Stock motorcycles were, let me think, we were almost a half a second slow at Denver. So studying it and looking back, it's obvious now, you guys. Look, 2021. Now I'm talking about back, what's that, 91? That's 92, 93 tonight. That would be 30 years. 30 years ago, man. We didn't know much, and we still don't know much. If you look back, I thought I was the smartest guy at the racetrack 30 years ago. I probably was not the smartest guy there, but I probably thought I was. And I might have even treated you like I thought I was. I understand that I was wrong, and now I just know more by serendipity. I get to say this. Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then. And we just kept bumping along, and we learned a lot. But what was going on at Denver is, you get you some good gauges, and you go there, and at say, Gainesville, it was 2,000 feet corrected altitude. Now, I'm going to say corrected because the track is only 400 feet above sea level. But when you're humid and hot, all those three factors, you get to use the humidity, the barometer, and the temperature. And doing the math, and I'm not going to go into the math right now, but I'm going to just tell you these are my opinions based on the things that I think I know, that I think I learned, and have paid me back well in my years, because I think I knew them and I applied them to what I thought I knew. So I'm not going to tell you that any of this is correct, but this is what we learned. So when we went to Denver, we would lose a lot of horsepower, so we'd change the gear. We would add 3 or 4 teeth to the rear sprocket, or us really crafty guys way back then, is we would go down one on the front. Like if we had a 15 tooth on the front, we'd go down to a 14 and leave the same one on the back. And that would really confuse our competition, because with the really radical bikes we had with the car tires on the back and the offset sprockets, where you would have to move the sprocket over and you would have like a 3-inch offset sprocket, nobody ever got to see your front sprocket, and a front sprocket cost $200 or $300 back then. So you didn't have like a 14 and a 15 and a 16. You had the sprocket, and you changed the back all year long. In HRA races, we would run between 1,000 feet corrected and 4,000 feet corrected all year long. And then we go, and Gainesville was 400 feet, Atlanta was 1,200 feet, and then Vegas might have been 300 feet, 3,000 feet. I'm sorry I say these numbers a little bit wrong because I'm looking while I'm talking. And then one year they stuck in Denver, and it's 5,000 feet static. So over here I wrote static versus density. The real field elevation might have been 400 feet, might have been 1,200 feet, and over here it was 5,000 feet. But when you go to Denver in July, and it's 95 degrees outside and 20% humidity, 10% humidity, the corrected altitude easily goes to 9,000 feet. And I'm going to tell you, my friends, if you go to a Hogs Gone Wild race, or one of those neat small tire races, or Radial Against the World, or any other, I should have said, normally aspirated races like those guys do in Michigan up there, where they have to run no nitrous, no turbo, no supercharger, but they have to run all motor. All motor class right here lives and dies by these things that I'm telling you right now, because there's no way to add more oxygen Now, when we go to Gainesville and it's, say, 1,000-foot corrected altitude, the oxygen content of the air is around 20%. If we get one of those rare days where the temperature goes down to 60 and the barometer's 30, this might go to 21%. That is when 100% of the air going in your engine, about 20% of it is oxygen. And oxygen is what we use added to the gasoline at about 12 or 13 to 1 ratio is how we make horsepower. We burn the gasoline, but we need this oxygen to make the burn. This is the O2 percentage. Now, the boys that were in Vegas this weekend, they were running about 4,000 feet. I keep up with it because listen to me, y'all. I was in pro stock engines and motorcycles and cars for 3 decades and full time for 20 something years. And I learned a lot about this right here. When you're at 4,000 feet, you've got 17 or 18% oxygen to work with. So you're not going to make as much power. So you're going to change your gearing, you're going to change your jetting. And I also learned the wrong way going to Denver. I thought I needed a lot of timing because there was no air. I was wrong. It wasn't wet. It wasn't humid. It was dry. It needs less timing. It's really hard to get through your thick skull when you tune off of corrected altitudes. When the air's bad, we would stick a degree in. When it was hot, we'd stick a degree in. And when it was hot, we'd pull a jet. Or when it was cold, we'd add a jet. But we didn't have any meters. We didn't have any gauges. We didn't have O2 sensors. We didn't have wide bands. We didn't know any of that stuff. And that's another great story because the vacuum pumps came in right in the middle of this relationship that John Myers and I had winning races, and we were able to sneak in the first wideband capabilities. It cost $15,000 for a wideband back in that time. I think it was 1995 when we had the first wideband. 1996 when we got the first vacuum pump. 1997 we got more, and then when Angel came along and we were trying to make her bike go fast and they kept adding weight to us, we started adding vacuum pumps. At one time with the Team Winston bike in 1999, we had 3 electric vacuum pumps on her bike for ballast. And everybody was mad because they even had a rules meeting where they said, okay, everybody, let's vote who can have, how many vacuum pumps you can have. So they went around to each person in the group of pro stock motorcycle teams, and everybody voted for 1 vacuum pump. So in 2001, when they made the rule that we could only have 1 vacuum pump, then we came up with a team from Star Machine, and they made us a giant 2-piston vacuum pump, and we ran it on 20-something volts, and we spun that bad boy up, and it would pull 22 or 3 inches of vacuum at the starting line before we'd even leave the starting line, and it was worth a tenth on the racetrack. Now, let me tell you about that, because a lot of guys, once they know this and they read this and they check on it and they race Harleys and 6,000, 7,000 RPM engines, there's not much gain with a vacuum pump in horsepower, sheer horsepower. The gain comes from the higher we rev it, the faster the piston speed, and the more loss of ring seal we have is when the vacuum pumps really come in. And that's something else I want to talk about. But I want to try and go back to Denver for a minute before I change off to the vacuum pump. Sock du jour, Titans. People ask me all the time, what socks? There it is, right there. Now you see it. I wrote down chips, tires, Denver, 20%, race in July, race in March, and why. All right, I just want to go over that real quick with you guys. One thing I noticed when first time we went to Denver was Jackie got smart one day and said, we need to buy all our groceries that we can before we get there so we don't have to go to the grocery store. So we bought all those cool potato chips and all those vacuum sealed foods, and I had this big bag of Cheetos. And you know, it's not squishy, but it's not plump, but it was packaged somewhere near me where the barometer outside was 2,900 and in the bag's 2,900. So when I got to Denver and opened the cabinet to get me a snack, there were balloons. All the chips and all the Cheetos and everything, the cookies, everything were inflated. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. What had happened? What happened? I don't understand it. And what was going on was the barometer outside in Georgia at the time was holding the bag at bay, and the pressure in the bag and outside the bag was the same. So when I got to Denver, the barometer had gone down to 2347. 2347. Now, if you got a bag of chips with 2900 pressure inside of it in Georgia, that looks like a balloon in Denver. The pressure difference is incredible between 23 and 29. Our tires at Denver, I'd set the air in the burnout area, let it down to 5.5. And John would roll out there in the water, and that doggone tire was flat, y'all. That thing was flat. I said, no, the gauge is wrong. I sent Ken down there to the CSR tent or the whoever was doing our gauge at the time, and they had them calibrate it for us. And yeah, it was on 0. It was right. Well, come back and find out that the pressure outside did not support what I thought I needed for air pressure on the inside. And I was basing all my knowledge based on experience at sea level or near sea level, or in this range, 1,000 to 4,000 feet. And boy, if I was right at 1,000, I was screwing up at 4,000. So what I learned there was your air pressure is never the same unless the weather's the same. Your air pressure is never the same at the barometer's different. Now, we're pinching pennies and looking for little changes, but if you're going to move that far, go from 1,000 feet to 9,000 feet, there's a big difference in what you need, just like the engine. So back to the normally aspirated story, the only thing that makes air go in the engine, I know people think that the pistons go down and that sucks air in the engine, but that's not what it is. What you've got going on is you got a piston at TDC, and you got, when the intake valve is opening and the piston is going down, you're creating a depression that has a lower pressure than the barometer. So the barometer is shoving the air pressure into the engine. So when the piston goes down, it creates a negative pressure, and the outside pressure, the God's supercharger, shoves 14 psi into that engine, or whatever the barometer is that day, which it turns into pressure. So when you're at Denver, and you have 9,000 feet corrected altitude, you have less barometer. You have 2300, 23.0, 24.0 versus 29.9. Vegas this weekend was 27.7 barometer. So there was less air going in the engine. Now, if you have an EFI, if you have electronic fuel injection, and at NHRA, they don't allow the pros to run closed loop where you can use all the sensors. Yes, when we ran the SNS Pro Stock 160 with the Buell engine, we had all the sensors, but they were not connected to the EFI. I read my barometer online while I was going down, not online, but I read it live. While I was going down the track, you could see what it was recorded. You could see what the humidity and the water grains and all that was going down the track. You could see the barometer. You could see all that stuff, but you had to write the tune-up into the computer, into the laptop, and you had to load it into the motorcycle, and you could not change it once you loaded it. And that's called, that's a little bit open loop. Like, you would have to tell it the fuel you wanted it to have going down the track ahead of time. You can't let like it does on your new motorcycle or your new car or your new truck. You're driving down the road, it measures barometer, it measures humidity, temperature, and it changes the fuel and the timing to suit the weather. We can't do that in Pro Stock, or couldn't do that in Pro Stock. So we had to rely on using all this information that we learned, load it into the tune-up, and put the tune-up in the machine. Now, when we went to Denver and we went to EFI the first time in 2005, I was like, this thing will not run. It was running 10-to-1 air fuel, and we were running 100%. Like, I had a map made on the Magneti Morelli, and it was at 100. Steve Nichols taught me all of this at the time. That's all we knew. Steve said, you build your map and set it on 100, and if the air gets really good, like you come over here, you might set it on 102%. Or you might set it on 101 or 103 or 109 with really good air. But normal operation somewhere in between these two altitudes was around 100. Well, we got to Denver, it wouldn't run, so we wasted a whole run, couldn't get down the track. So then qualifier 2, Friday evening, we couldn't get down the track, and we wasted another run. So by Saturday morning or Saturday noon or Saturday 3 o'clock, whenever they let us run, we started peeling fuel out and quit blaming it on the O2 sensors. These things, the wide bands are wrong. They're telling us the wrong info. They're wrong. So we started peeling fuel out, and we ended up with 20% less fuel to run at Denver and qualify on the pole or set the track record or win rounds. And I want to tell you, man, the late, great John Myers and I raced carburetors, and we won there a bunch of times. He won 3 championships racing with us in NHRA. And then Angel, who's still racing, doing great, driving for Vance and Hines and the Suzuki team now. And I bet you the funniest thing when she goes to Denver this year, when she gets her chips from her new sponsor, which I use those too. Everybody, I think, does. And I think it's, what's it, Mission? I can't remember the name, but I'm a fan. And when she gets her chips from buying them in New Orleans and bringing them to the track, or Vance and Hines guys put them in there in Indiana and then go to Denver, when those boys show up with the truck and they open the trailer, it's going to have some giant balloon-looking bags of Mission chips. I don't know if that's the name, so please don't get mad at me if I misquote it, but I was just using it for an example how to talk about it. But she won a lot of races at Denver, and I won as their team owner and their coach and their tuner. We won a lot of times. Now, what we learned at Denver was we learned a lot of stuff about Barometer and also this vacuum. The vacuum is, I'm going to say this is my opinion, and it could be the truth scientifically, but vacuum is the absence of pressure. So in your crankcase, if you have vacuum in your crankcase, that means you have less than 0 pressure. So when we would put big vacuum pumps on and we would pull the pressure down to 10 inches, 20 inches, or whatever, that would be negative crankcase pressure, which would mean the absence of pressure, which means we had 0 blow-by. We had no pressure going by the rings. We had nothing coming out of the bottom end. So we were actually pulling a negative pressure on the pistons. Now, this I'm running out of time fast, so this is going to have to be another day for a full story on this. But I wanted to tell you that this vacuum is controlled by ring seal, the seals in the engine, gaskets, and a lot of things that would let it leak. But it's also controlled by this in a big way. So if you have a vacuum number that you run all the time in between these 2 altitudes, let's say you pull 20 inches of vacuum all the time running around in here, I bet you pull 21 here. I bet you pull about 20 or 19 here. And when you get here, it's going to be less, because guess what? It doesn't show vacuum under 2990 or 3010. It shows vacuum under the barometer, which is around 2350, 2400. So you're going to have less vacuum on your vacuum gauge here. I ran out of time, y'all, but I wanted to share. This is the reason. These things is going to be the reason why I have a good story to tell y'all about ring seal and crankcase pressure, positive and negative crankcase pressure, and what's really going on in there, which I'm going to send out a nugget there to see if you guys, like this guy just asked me, how does that not pull the oil out of the crankcase when you have a vacuum pump? Well, guess what? It doesn't have anything to do with that. And I'll tell you that another time, because I only can use this. I don't want to use this up for a long time, but this was great getting to see you guys. I love the names popping up. There's a lot more people coming to watch, and this will be available on my YouTube channel. Jackie will record this, and we'll put it up on the Star Racing page tomorrow as a link to our YouTube page. And I'm going to try my best to get all 90 episodes up so we can review them as we go. And the reason I get to talk about this stuff is, one, is I've lived through it. I've done it wrong. I've learned. I've burned it up. I've drove over the parts. I've run over the parts. I've dragged the parts home. I took them with me. I just blew up a lot of stuff, so I learned. I'm loving sharing it with you guys, and your feedback, the comments, the questions, the information you guys send back to me is priceless, and I want to thank y'all. Thank God for all of this. I'm blessed to be able to share, and you guys take care of each other, and we are all as humans, and we were all created in God's image. May God bless y'all. Good night.